On August 18, 2021, I made a video entitled Afghanistan, the Taliban, What is Next? In it, I remarked about the U.S. military pullout of the country. According to U.S. President Joe Biden, we had been there too long. However, I gave speculative scenarios about what would precipitate a return of the U.S. military into the country.
It would be suicide for the Taliban to do anything in regards to terrorism on U.S. interests right now, because it would just basically invite the United States, the coalition, to return. And so what I think what they're doing is basically saying all the right things right now, and that maybe in the future, either through their own efforts or from a false flag, say from the CIA, or from, say, the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, or through a number of different espionage agencies where they can infiltrate these groups, and it's not that hard, and can influence an attack of sorts in which using weapons that I think were left behind on purpose so that they can engage in activities in which they could precipitate a return of the U.S. and its coalition partners. CNN, now this is where people need to understand. When it comes to foreign policy, there is no left and right. There is only one party, and that's the war party. And legacy media like CNN, like CBS, and MSNBC, who are moderately left, they're not liberal. I'll just tell you that right now. Don't be tricked into thinking these are liberal agencies. They're not. They have very much in common when it comes to Fox, because look who they have on to talk about foreign policy and the Pentagon, well, the State of War Department. Well, they have former four-star generals, Wade Miley, H.R. McMaster, just former neocon, Stephen Miller, a slew, even John Bolton was on CNN, John Bolton on CNN. So, yeah, I mean, there's only one party when it comes to the Pentagon, the War Department, private military contracting firms, major military corporations like Raytheon, Boeing, LG3 Technologies. They send over their spokespeople to talk on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. Yeah, this is who controls the media. Yeah.
8 days later, we have just the attack that I outlined as a scenario. According to the Associated Press, entitled Kabul Airport Attack Kills 60 Afghans, 13 U.S. Troops. Quote, 2 suicide bombers and gunmen attacked crowds of Afghans flocking to Kabul's airport Thursday, transforming a scene of depression and desperation into one of horror in the waning days of an airlift for those fleeing the Taliban takeover. The attacks killed at least 60 Afghans and 13 U.S. troops, Afghan and U.S. officials have said. The U.S. general overseeing the evacuation said the attacks would not stop the United States from evacuating Americans and others, and flights out were continuing. General Frank McKenzie, head of the U.S. Central Command, said there was a large amount of security at the airport, and alternate routes were being used to get evacuees in. About 5,000 people were awaiting flights on the airfield, McKenzie said. The blast came hours after U.S. Western officials warned of a major attack, urging people to leave the airport. But that advice went largely unheeded by Afghans desperate to escape the country in the last few days of an American-led evacuation before the U.S. officially ends its 20-year presence on August 31st. The Islamic State group claimed responsibility for the killings on its Amaq news channel. The IS affiliate in Afghanistan is far more radical than the Taliban, who recently took control of the country in a lightning blitz. The Taliban were not believed to have been involved in the attacks, condemned the blasts. In an emotional speech from the White House, U.S. President Joe Biden said the latest bloodshed would not drive the U.S. out of Afghanistan earlier than scheduled, and that he instructed the U.S. military to develop plans to strike Islamic State Biden went on to say, "We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay." U.S. officials initially said 11 Marines and one Navy medic were among those who died. Another service member died hours later. 18 service members were wounded, and officials warned the toll could grow. More than 140 Afghans were wounded, an Afghan official said. One of the bombers struck people standing knee-deep in a wastewater canal under the sweltering sun, throwing bodies into the fetid water. Those who moments earlier had hoped to get on flights out could be seen carrying the wounded to ambulances in a daze, their own clothes darkened with blood. Emergency, an Italian charity that operates hospitals in Afghanistan, said it had received at least 60 patients wounded in the airport attack, in addition to 10 who were dead when they arrived. Surgeons will be working into the night, said Marco Puntanin, the charity's manager in Afghanistan. The wounded overflowed the triage zone into the physiotherapy area. More beds were being added, he said. The Afghan official who confirmed the overall Afghan toll spoke on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to brief media. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said one explosion was near an airport entrance and another was in a short distance away by a hotel. McKenzie said clearly some failure at the airport allowed a suicide bomber to get so close to the gate. He said the Taliban have been screening people outside the gates, though there was no indication that the Taliban deliberately allowed Thursday's attacks to happen. He said the U.S. had tasked Taliban commanders to tighten security around the airport perimeter. Adam Khan, who was waiting nearby when he first saw the explosion outside what's known as the Abbey Gate, he said several people appeared to have been killed or wounded, including some who were maimed. The second blast was at or near Badon Hotel, where many people, including Afghans, Britons, and Americans, were told to gather in recent days before heading to the airport from evacuation. Additional explosions could be heard later, but Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said some blasts were carried out by U.S. forces to destroy their equipment. A former Royal Marine who runs an animal shelter in Afghanistan says he and his staff were caught up in the aftermath of the blast near the airport. All of a sudden, we heard gunshots and our vehicle was targeted. Had our driver not turned around, he would have been shot in the head by a man with an AK-47. Paul Farthing told Britain's Free Press Association news agency. Farthing is trying to get staff of his NOAD charity out of Afghanistan along with the group's rescued animals. He is among thousands trying to flee. Over the last week, the airport had been the scene of some of the most searing images of the chaotic end of America's longest war and the Taliban's takeover. As flight after flight took off carrying those who fear a return to the militant's brutal rule, when the Taliban were last in power, they confined women largely to their home and widely imposed draconian restrictions. In Washington, Biden spent much of the morning in the secure White House Situation Room, where he was briefed on the explosions and conferred with his national security team and commanders on the ground in Kabul. Overnight, warnings emerged from Western capitals about a threat from the U.S., which has seen its ranks boosted by the Taliban's freeing of prisoners during its advance through Afghanistan. Shortly before the attack, the acting U.S. ambassador to Kabul, Ross Wilson, said the security threat at the Kabul airport overnight was clearly regarded as credible, as imminent, as compelling. But in an interview with ABC News, he would not give details. Late Wednesday, the U.S. Embassy warned citizens at 3 airport gates to leave immediately due to unspecified security threats. Australia, Britain, and New Zealand also advised their citizens Thursday not to go to the airport. The Sunni extremists of Islamic State, with links to the group's more well-known affiliate in Syria and Iraq, carried out a series of brutal attacks, mainly targeting Afghanistan's Shiite Muslim minority, including a 2020 assault on a maternity hospital in Kabul, in which they killed women and infants. Taliban have fought against the Islamic State militants in Afghanistan, where the Taliban had wrestled back control after nearly 20 years. after they were ousted by a U.S.-led invasion. The Americans went in following after the 9/11 attacks, with Al-Qaeda orchestrated while being sheltered by the group. What the Associated Press won't tell you is that the United States had asked Taliban for evidence. The Taliban had asked the United States for evidence of Bin Laden's participation in the attacks, in which then U.S. President Bush said, "We don't negotiate with terrorists." It wasn't the first time the United States tried to negotiate a deal to get the Taliban to relinquish Bin Laden to the Saudis. In 2000, former Saudi Prince of the GID, the General Intelligence Directorate, Prince Turki bin Faisal, had tried to negotiate a deal with Taliban leader Mohammed Mullah Omar, in which Omar turned down the deal. So what can we expect from the latest attacks? Do we expect a return to the old ways of U.S. military coming back and fighting an endless war with a terrorist group that was once actually funded and trained by the United States? And that was the radical militants in Syria under Operation Timber Sycamore in 2011 under President Barack Obama, orchestrated by General David Petraeus, which was supported by then Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu and King Abdullah II in Jordan, which was primarily funded by the Saudis. Hundreds of millions of dollars went in, while the United States went and trained Sunni extremists in the hopes of having President Bashir al-Assad overthrown by the militants. Program ended in 2017 under President Donald Trump. Trump, in his own right, then brokered a deal with the Taliban and funded the Taliban in their fight against the Islamic State Khorasan, the name of the group that the Taliban are trying to eliminate from the country. 2019, the Washington Post broke a story about how Donald Trump was sending millions of dollars to help fund the Taliban in their fight against the Islamic State Khorasan. Seems the Islamic State Khorasan has now generated an attack against U.S. interests, in which I feared would be one of the reasons where we could see a U.S. return into the country. But the question is, how long now, if we do send back a serious delegation of U.S. troops to help the Taliban fight against the Islamic State in Khorasan, or will the United States fight the Islamic State Khorasan on their own? Like I said in that video that I posted on August 18th, and I'll say it again, war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continued. Has now seen that quote revisited in the present day in Afghanistan.